Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Akibatun lil Mustaqim. Wala Rwana ila ala dalimin. Sayyidina Muhammadin. Sallallahu Allah Ta'ala wa alayhi wa salam. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Likwani wati fi deen. Wa salamu mani salamu ala mani taba huda. Likwani wati fi Frikia, Europa, America, wa Caribbean wa kuli makan. Halim wa salim bikum. How you doing today, my dear brothers and sisters? And this is a continuance of the saga of Kemet and how Kemet is ours. And the last couple of weeks, you notice I've been going through giving a plethora of information, talking about how this history has been hijacked. As you know, all the time, our history has always been hijacked and whitewashed or just forgotten. And Egypt, or Kemet, which we should call it Kemet by the name that was given to it by our ancestors, who became the West Africans and became the African Americans, because African Americans are descended from West Africa. And so we give proof and DNA and everything about that. We went through that. Anyone comes in the chat, want to argue about this, I've been polite, I've been gentlemanly. I've said, please review, but they refuse to review the other videos showing the explanation and whatnot. They refuse. So they want to try here to take me off and to take me out of the subject at hand. So I won't entertain those questions today. Brothers and sisters, this is a very troubling development that has happened among the African community at large, because the African people around the world are overwhelmingly still quote unquote Christians. And they do not understand what they are actually believing. Even the pastors and the bishops and all the names they call themselves who help to perpetuate the white European Christianity don't understand where these documents that compiled the Bible, they don't know. And many of them don't even care, because they make money by continuously to peddle this type of nonsense. See, now we have good people, white, black, Jew, African, who have come forward, have done extensive research showing that this compilation of the Bible is basically a lie, meaning that the Africans, the Kemetics, had these documents well before the Bible was created. Subhanahu wa ta'ala talked to us first. It's him who gave us the riddle of the universe. It was him who gave us the meaning of the four opposites, the laws of opposite. It's us. It's him who gave us the writing systems that went around the world. It was him who gave us the mystery systems that we still understand, that we're learning to understand today. He gave us these mystery systems. As we begin to move across, India developed mystery systems. The Chinese developed mystery systems. The Japanese developed mystery systems. See, so in essence, brothers and sisters, we are basically the chosen ones. And you look at the logic behind this. When Subhanahu wa ta'ala created the first human beings, He did not create them in Europe like many of the racist, genocidal racists say today. They were black. We know in the Rift Valley is where the creation where we found. We know these people to be black. And so it only common sense that Subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to us, but we bungled it. See, and we lost the knowledge by the 1800s. Now you look at 2000, excuse me, about 3,500 years, Subhanahu wa ta'ala had given us all this knowledge. It began to dissipate until about the time of Islam. When Islam came, then it went back up again. When the colonials, now the Europeans, became powerful, the Tubab Europeans became powerful, they began to take this knowledge away from us again. They tried it in 300 when they sent Roman soldiers into camp to kill all of the scholars, the mystery scholars that we understand, and destroy all of the suppositories, which they thought they did, but they didn't. And so we see this pattern now from the Tubab and his quest to steal our history, and the most coveted quote unquote book on earth is not what they said it's to be. It's actually our books that they had compiled, and I'll get into that. So this should make you rethink and go back to do your research. And those brothers who are Hebrews and Christians, you need to rethink. Because if you look inside the Quran, there's no correlation between the Bible and the Quran. Many people who do not understand that say, no, the Quran borrowed from the Bible. It did not. You don't find any duplicate chapters in the Bible that are equal to that of the Quran. Totally different. Totally different. Even the creation is totally different. And we'll get into that why. Let's honor our guest here today. Assalamu alaikum, my dear brother. How you doing? Thank you for showing up today. I'm honored that you're here today. Thank you very much, my dear brother. And Cameron, how you doing, my dear brother? Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, my dear brother, for showing up today. I'm honored that you're here today. I agree with all the originators of all knowledge. Yes, that's, brothers and sisters, this is an important development that you should understand, is that we conveyed this knowledge. The Europeans, the Tubab, stole it. Okay, they took it at one time, honestly, okay, and they learned under us. Then they began to cheat us by claiming that they were originators of these documents. I'll get into that. There's a connection between Nigerians and Japanese, yes, like there's a Edo people of Nigeria and Edo people. Yes, you know, Sheikh Diop and Japanese scientists got together. I can't remember when it was, because the Japanese were trying to find the origins of their language. Anybody who understands and has the translations of the Japanese language is very much like that of the West African dialects, no doubt. Because when I began to learn the Japanese, I started to pick it up quickly. Why? Because the dialect is very similar. Yes, the Japanese pronounce the words very differently in some ways, but you see the vowels and letters and the composition of the words, they're very much like African words. Well, after the linguist experts of Japan and Sheikh Diop of Senegal got together, they determined that the Japanese language was an African language. It makes sense because the founders of Japan were actually black. They've proven this, showing that even the first black samurais in the 6th, the 7th century were black. And we have their names. And it's written in Japanese documents, because the Japanese became very literate, and they wrote their history, and they talked about these black people who were the originals who fought to unify Japan. See, so yes, what you're saying there is true, very, very true. And a lot of people don't know that aspect. But there's some other aspects too that is very interesting in the development, talking about the Japanese people and Japanese women. I don't want to get too much about that because I gave you some bits because it's sexually charged, but our famous gynecologist, who was the first one, Al Jahiz, gave us a lot of information about that. I explained that weeks back ago about how you determine the race basically of a woman if she got the African heritage. I talked about that. I won't talk about that now. It's not the time for that, but you understand. How you doing, my dear brother Henry? How you doing? Looks like yes, yes. I'm going to tell you right now, the Japanese language. You when you start to speak it, you see why Africans. Have you noticed African Americans and Africans? They go to Japan, they pick it up very quickly, very quickly, very quick. Okay, like you saying goodbye, sayonara. It's very similar. Okay, in Japanese language, sayonara. It's you go, goodbye, so forth and so on. You listen to the vowels and way and how it's very, very similar, brothers and sisters. Very, very similar. Very, very similar. And it's why we pick it up very quickly. We pick up these languages, be honest with you, more quickly than the European, even English. It's just that the English is thrown down our throats. But you notice something, brothers and sisters, after all these centuries that we've had the English language, not many of us on the continent or outside of the continent have the correct dialect or the accent to pronounce all of English right. As you heard me talk before previously, you take a brother, African or African American, and you take a tuba, Englishman, Irishman, Welsh, to this like this, and even some of the other Western Europeans, ask them to recite one paragraph. Listen to the black man and listen to the white man. Totally different, because it's not our language. But when you get to talk about Japan in particular, you listen to the brothers recite the Japanese language. It's very good because the dialects are African. Big difference, brothers and sisters. Big, big difference. Even some of the names like you. Yes, brother, it's right. Yes, Yuki is a girl's name. See, there is so many similarities. It's incredible. Very, very, very interesting. And even China, in recent years, one man uncovered a hidden village of black ancient Chinese. They have been black from time immemorial. The Chinese government has suppressed this. They are short-statured people with very, very oval eyes. And I saw pictures of them. Somebody on Facebook showed the pictures of them when these people uncovered them and took pictures of them quickly and smuggled the pictures out and then showing the world. They're original Chinese. They look just like Chinese, but they're black. Short-statured, look just like Chinese. And they're in hidden valleys, and the government tries to, try to suppress this for obvious reasons. We know what that's about. Okay, my brothers and sisters, now let's get into this here. I'm going to show you something here to start you off on what I was talking about. I'm going to give you something, and you look at this, I'm going to give you the abbreviations underneath so you can understand it better. I give you something, a map of what has happened to us. We went here, came back to Kemp, left Kemp, and so forth and so on. I'll give you this to let you look at this and decipher this, and you can go back later another time and watch this. But I want to show you something to give you this, and these are the migrations and so forth and so on. And the where we at here? Okay. Now these guys, I got to put it back in there. They took it out, brothers. Okay, now I got it back in there. The black here is, we see the black is going from Kemp to Europe. The blue is when the Akan, the Ga, the Igbo, the Hausa, there's Mende, there's a whole bunch of others, Ewe, there's a whole bunch of other Africans who now are in Kemp, left and traveled northwards up through Jazira Arab, Middle East, as we know it today, into Europe. The Europeans gave these black people, because they had strange tenets and habits, and he saw the way their naming ceremonies and all of the other things that they had. So they called them Jews and Hebrews. See, Then the red is the European converts. They were the last. They said that the European converts that we see today in Israel came around about the second AD. They began to come around about the second AD into this region, and they were converts. See, and then we have the purple, the Exodus. Now, the black, they returned. Okay, the blacks. Okay, Jews. Okay, now excuse me. In the blue, you see the blue. They're in Europe. They go back into Messer. Here's the conflict, brothers and sisters, and this is where we start to have the deception. They were black, but I give you an analogy what I'm talking about in this situation here. I'll give you the story to this, and then I'll give you the analogy behind this. In the blue there, they spent centuries and centuries among the Tubal, especially among the Greeks. They were now more, okay, European Africans, as you call it, whatever you want to call it, but they were Jews. They called them Jews and Hebrews. They went back into Egypt. They had conflicts with their Akan brothers. They were Akan, Ga, Ewe, Hausa, Mende, all these, they were all of that before. After centuries of being with the Tubal, they became Jews and Hebrews. Now they were no longer like their African brothers. I'll give you an analogy to this. The African Americans. What happened? Our ancestors were taken from the continent, from West Africa, right, and North Africa, brought into the Americas. The Africans who spent 400 years now with the Tubal now has come back to Africa, to the continent. He is no longer like his Ghanaian brother. He is no longer like his Gambian brother or his Senegalese brother or his Malian brother. He's no longer Ewe. He's no longer Capelli, even though his DNA says this, because he spent 400 years adrift from his African brothers. He's not quote unquote African anymore. He has to be retaught this. You see, this is what I'm talking about here. When the Jews and Hebrews now, who are Akan, Hausa, and so forth and so on, came back to Egypt, there was a conflict between their brothers who had remained in camp, who were Hausa and Ga, and so forth and so on, Akan, mostly Akan. There were conflicts. And this conflict led to something, and I'll get into that. I'll entertain one more thing. Okay, no, wait. Yeah, let me get more into this. Excuse me. The green is the Akan and Hausa Exodus. The Jews had their exodus in the purple. Now, this is the key. We have a lot of grumblings among our Hebrew brothers. They say nobody acknowledges them. Yes, it's true. There's a reason why there's no acknowledgement of our Hebrew African brothers, especially in West Africa. It's because by the Europeans, the Tubal, mentioning them, they have to now go back to Messer. To Kemp. They don't want to do that. So it's kind of like they push the African Hebrews who are real Hebrews, okay, from West Africa, and squash them as though they don't exist. Because why? When you use the word Hebrew, you have to go back to what? Egypt. They don't want to tie Egypt to black people. So that's why they don't mention the real Jews. But nevertheless, all this is uncovered. See, and then the purple is the Jewish Exodus, and so forth and so on. The purple is the Jewish Exodus, and they went everywhere, okay, to many places, and then of course taken into the Americas as slaves. And many people now are uncovering that they have this Hebrew heritage. So they have that. The green, the Akan. Now, when there was a big exodus out of Egypt, in the green, dark green there, now the ancient Kemetics now became West Africans. They became the Ghanaians. They became the Cote d'Ivoirians, the Mali, the Hausa, all of these different groups, Fulani, Amazigh, Sinike, Wolof, that's what they became now. As they begin to drift apart, they begin to develop their own cultures and language and natural selection. This is why we have different DNA designations. There's E designation, yes, but there's an EM maybe over here in the Gambia, and there's an E1B that's in Ghana, but all of them are still related. So this is what I'm talking about, brothers and sisters. It's a fascinating development because I want to get you to understand that while we were the chosen people, it was our migrations that they're talking about, and it was taken from us. In order to cover that, we had wars, we had enslavement, colonization, we had knowledge taken from us. Okay, this is what has happened to make sure that we do not get this correct knowledge. But good men, historians who were white, Africans, there were Jews who came forward now to start doing their investigations. They gave us books, they gave us the proof that this is a big fat lie. And it's very, very interesting. My brother says, yes, here we go. Yes, that's right, my dear brother. That's right, it's facts. And we have to look at this. This is very destructive to our Christian, so-called Christian brothers and sisters, because they have been doped like everyone else. They are believing that the books that they have was written by some legendary white people. It was written by them, but it was stolen from the Africans. And we have the acknowledgement of that. And we'll get into that as I talk right now. We'll start to look at this and we'll go from there and so forth, brothers and sisters. So I'm giving you this. Now, let me say this to you, brothers and sisters, please. I don't want anybody to say I'm trying to defame any Black person or their belief systems. I'm going to give you the truth. I'm not going to sugarcoat this because we have had this talk before, and we have people who do not want to recognize the truth because they're so entrenched into the Christian, so-called Christian doctrine, that they don't realize that it's actually the African doctrine that you should be praising. See, and so I'm giving you this, and it's very destructive because you will look and say, I didn't know I'm believing this. I didn't know this happened. So some are going to get upset because we know that. Anybody who talks against anything, is terrorism, is anti-Semitism, all this. Nobody is going and saying anything against the Christians or Jews in regard to hate or anything. No, it's not your fault. It's not my fault. None of us, because we were all taught, how many? This lie has been going on for over 3,000 years. We're all taught that it was the Tubal, it was his works, his books, his documents, his prophets, and everything else. They killed in the 300 to keep this new thing going. By the 1500s, they began to kill and enslave and Black people by saying that we were savages. They didn't want it known that they got documents from us. The Catholic Church changed the depiction of Jesus, alayhi salatu wasalam, in 1507. What's his name? He was homosexual. What's his name? Michelangelo, I think it is. He was commissioned by the Catholic Church to recreate Jesus, alayhi salatu wasalam, and Mary and make them white. From that time on, they ran with that. And they suppressed, destroyed most of the Black Christ that they had all through Europe. To his credit, Putin and his people kept that in a safe spot. As you know, about 3 months ago, he unveiled the truth. See, so now it's starting to come out. For you to accept it or not, it's up to you. If you're a Christian, if you say, well, hey, no, look, I know this, and it's true. That's your prerogative. You will answer on the hereafter for that. I'm not trying to tell you to come to Islam or whatever. I'm just going to give you the facts, how things are, and take it from there. Okay, brothers and sisters. Now, when you open up the Bible, you see the Genesis chronology. This is very puzzling because you see the discrepancies in it. Because you have the Masoretic version, you have the Septuagint version, then you have the Samaritan Hebrew alternate version. It's the Samaritan people who were the caretakers of many valuable books, of many prophets. You know him, John the Baptist, we know him as Yahya. Jesus, alayhi salam. Even our prophet Muhammad had encounters with a Samaritan scholar. We don't regard the Samaritans as disbelievers. We don't consider them to be mushrikeen. We consider them to be Muslims who says that Jesus والسلام, is a prophet and not a God. They had the right documents. They had the right documents. They knew where the documents came from. That's why they were slaughtered. You notice today how many Samaritans are there left? And they're still in hiding. Many of them don't want to admit because they had the right version. They had the Sunnah of Isa, Jesus. They had the Sunnah of Moses. They had the Sunnah of John the Baptist. When our prophet ﷺ came across him as a boy, I think he was 12 years old, the Samaritan who had the documents from John the Baptist, who talked about two prophets that will come. One, he said, was Jesus ﷺ, and the next one will be among the Arabs. Okay, this Samaritan who was in hiding in Sham, which we know today as Syria. How he knew that the prophet was coming, because he was told in a dream, the Samaritan, he was told that he look up into the sky, he will find a cloud that it's by itself, and it's moving towards him. When he had this dream, he began to look up every day for this particular cloud. When the Arabs, who are now before Islam came about, because the Prophet ﷺ was now a boy, he accompanied the Quraysh, who was a powerful tribe, Arab tribe, into Sham for natural trading that they'd gone on for centuries, right? They came across in this secluded area a big castle, guarded, very mysterious. They came across it. The helpers came to greet them, and they were treated very nice because even they knew them to be, the Samaritans, to be people of the book. They knew this. And when the scholar came out, he began to look at them. And then he went outside. He saw a cloud that was hovering above. He said, "Who is out there?" He asked the leadership, the Quraysh there inside his castle. Now they gave hospitality. He said, "Who is out there?" He said, "Oh, it's a boy, 12, 13 years old." He said, "Bring him to me." So they brought him. The first thing the Samaritan did, because he had all the books. That's right, brothers and sisters. He had the right stuff. He had the stuff from Jesus. He was going by John the Baptist. We know him as Yahya. John the Baptist described that these two prophets will come, Jesus and Moses, Jesus, and then Muhammad. He admitted this. He quickly asked the prophet to move his shirt, and found the mark of the prophet on the shoulder. That's right, brothers. This is a true story. So I want to give you this to give you who these people, Samaritans. I talked about they were something else. And let me give you something else about this. The Samaritans have lived under the protection of the Muslims for centuries. When we went into Andalus, remember I gave you the class? Remember I told you about the Christians who were persecuted? Guess who were persecuted? It was the Samaritans, the last remaining of the Samaritans. They were being slaughtered. They escaped to North Africa and asked for assistance and protection. Because the Prophet ﷺ knew of them, he talked about them, and the scholars knew of them to be not mushrikeen, as Subhanahu wa Ta'ala talks about them in the Quran. They gave them safe haven. We went into Andalus to fight to liberate them. That's right, brothers and sisters. This is a true statement. See, this is a true statement. So I wanted to give you this. These three have three different versions of the Genesis. Now you understand the confusion behind this? Why? because the Genesis is actually the king's list of the Kemites. The kings, there was 31 dynasties, brothers and sisters, 31 dynasties. The Genesis chronological fits the same as that of the king's list in Kemet. The king's list means all the pharaohs, 31. This is where the confusion is. And I'm going to start to give you this more of this information now as we talk, I'm talking now. My notes. The body of the religious documents from the biblical documents were compiled, edited, and translated were ancient Egyptian documents, kept documents. These documents were what the Jewish scholars of Egypt took and claimed as their own before the Greeks. Now you got to remember something. The Greeks had now conquered Egypt, Kemet. What's his name? Ptolemy, who was the king, asked the Jewish scientists. Now remember the Jews at this time, they were black. Remember they went into Egypt, became the Jews, and returned back to Egypt. They could speak the Greek language and so forth, right? So they said, look, I want you to compile a religious document. He asked them. This is why you can never find Jewish documents in the Middle East or any other place in the world, because they don't have them. They took them from the Africans. They took them from us because we had these creations. We had the Genesis. We had what Subhanahu wa Ta'ala gave us. See, as a matter of fact, let me show you that real fast. Some of it. The starting of the books, and I'll give you the suppository where this stuff was at. Get a load of this. Doesn't this sound familiar? 3,000 years approximately before the Bible was even assembled, Subhanahu wa Ta'ala talked to our ancestors and gave them who he was and told our ancestors who he was and how it's him who governs everything in the universe. He gave us a writing system. And the starting of it was the Tawheed. We understand this oneness of God in English. God is one and alone. These are just some snippets of it. None other exists with him. God is from the beginning. He is the father of the beginnings. This is what our ancestors wrote. Our Jewish brothers who were black pulled a fast one on the Greeks because the Greeks could not translate the hieroglyphics, but they could. So they took these documents, okay, from there and began to compile a Bible. And began to start with Tawheed. And this is how we came up with a lot of stuff that you see in the Bible today, especially the Old Testament. It was written from let's see if I got it here. I'll give it to you now. The suppository where all this stuff was found out. There was the AMARNA archives in English, but you'll know what I'm talking about here. Okay, let me write this in. Okay, I see your questions, brothers and sisters. Just hold fast here. I'm just trying. I want to give you something so you guys can do your research. These are the okay. There you go. This is the famous archives that was discovered. It was hidden. Our ancestors, when they were being defeated, finally destroyed, they hid many things in caverns underneath the ground. They found and named it, I don't know the Akan name for it because I don't have that, but they found this suppository. In the suppository, you start to find Tawheed that ended up in the Bible, because the Bible was created approximately between 2,000, 3,000 years after all these documents were compiled by our brothers when Subhanahu wa ta'ala talked to us first. They took those documents and recreated, changed names, added things to it, and said that they were the chosen people. Even though they were black, they were not the chosen people. And they fooled the Greeks. The Greeks took their interpretation, saying that this is our documents. The Greeks believed them. And this is why in the later centuries, when they found out that the Jews had doped them, they persecuted them in Europe. This is what I was talking about. You know what has happened, why Hitler said what he said. Remember, I went through this in another video about what Hitler said about the Jews. See, so he knew of the African heritage, and he told them to get out. He said, if you want to save yourself, I'll give you access. Many thousands and thousands left to go back into Africa, even though they're white now. But still, that's, another story in itself. But many died there in Europe, even the Africans, because the African Jews, who the original, stayed with their brothers there and died in many of those camps, as we understand today. So I wanted to give you that part. And we got, let me see here, we got here, no one will talk about the whitewashing. All support for, yes, because minute me, you, anybody talks about what they've done, minute we're criminals, we're malcontents. If you're Muslim, you're a terrorist. If you are a Pan-Africanist or whatever, they call you Afrocentric, they give you all these terms to denounce you. But the evidence is there, brothers and sisters. It's unequivocal. See, it's unequivocal. It's unequivocal. Now it's out. And I gave you the book by Greenberg, who's a Jew himself. He suffered mightily from the Jewish lobby because he exposed his brothers and told them, he said, look, this lie has to stop. This Bible was compiled in Egypt and was taken from Egyptian documents, documents from the suppositories. And we changed the things around. This is why today scientists know there's no such documents as the Jewish documents. There's nothing that's in the Middle East. There's been fabrications now where people have been writing documents, trying to claim this is the original documents that made up the Bible. It's a lie. They carbon date that. They know it's recent. There's been many fraud. There's one man made millions off what he found, and it was a fraud. I don't know what happened to him, but anyway, they've been trying to create these documents to make it appear as though they are the ones. Anyone know the original name for the Samaritans? You know what? There's the Akan name for them. I have that written down. I cannot. I'm sorry, brothers and sisters. I don't have that because there's a whole list of Akan names that the real names that was translated from our documents. And so I'm not sure of the name. We have to get back into that. Here we go. Here, what original? The original documents came from the suppositories here that they found. These documents also had the King's List, which they call OT. I talked about that last week. In there were documents. Now I give you another one. You remember Akhenaten? We talked about him before. You know his Akhenaten. We know him in the Khan language, the translation of the hieroglyphics. Akhenaten is what we know him as. He has beautiful hymns, beautiful in his love and his reverence for Subhanahu wa ta'ala. The hymns of Akhenaten. If you look at the Psalms in the Bible, they're almost exact. He wrote those documents about 2,500 years before they were put into the Bible. That's right, brothers and sisters. This is what I'm talking about. You find them in these archives. They found these books. They found the papyrus, and they found these small monoliths. They found hieroglyphics. They found many things, and they begin to take, and now it's out. It's just that they still suppressing it because The people who talk about this are being suppressed. See, so this is what we're talking about. And what original source can we rely on? Now we mean you talking about the Bible? There's no original source because the Bible has been changed around. That's why the names have been changed, just like what they say here. Let me get more. Let me give you something else here, so kind of give you a better definition here. Let me give you something here so you can understand. Okay. In 531, I think I got this down. Excuse me, my dear brothers. Okay, let me answer this question here. Okay, here we go. In 581, the first Bible was finalized. 3,500 years after they found all of these documents in the archives and on hidden hieroglyphics and so forth and so on, right? The hymns of Akaton are the hymns that you see in the Old Testament. The Song of Solomon that we know, the Tale of Two Brothers, I believe is in the Akan language, is another document that the kings, under the king's list, that the pharaohs wrote, is similar to that of Song of Solomon. There's a whole list, and you find too many similarities. The Genesis that you understand in the Bible today is actually the chronological list of the king's list, which there's 31 dynasties. And you find that the similarities are the same. As I said before, this is the problem here, because we have three bodies of interpretation who have a pull on how the Genesis is going to be written and rewritten and edited. This is why we have 140 different versions. And why I'm telling you that the Samaritan version most likely is more authentic, because they knew that the original documents were in Egypt, Kemet. They know that. And they were in possession of the real documents of many of the prophets. That's why they were killed. And they said they found many of the documents, and these guys killed them, the Christians, mercenaries and thugs and assassins, and destroyed many of the documents, because now the lie was out. They wanted to suppress this. And the Samaritans were still going after their Christian brothers, telling them, look, why, you know this is a lie. Jesus is a prophet. You know what John the Baptist said, because they had the books. It was John the Baptist who wrote in his documents that didn't find his way in the quote unquote Bible. It's very interesting, isn't it? It's him who told about, he talked to the Muslims in 600, when the Prophet was about approximately 12 years old. He had documents because he looked at the documents of Yahya. We know him as John the Baptist in English, right? He told again that there's going to be two prophets, one coming after him, Jesus, and the other one will have the name Ahmed or Muhammad. And he had to have the mark of the prophet on his shoulder. He examined the prophet when he was 12 years old. He found him to have that. See, so which version? None of them are really authentic, but the Samaritans had a compilation of books, okay, that was correct. It never found its way in the Bible for obvious reasons. Show me the documents of Jesus, how you know his sunnah, his way. You don't. The Jewish scientists tell you today they were all destroyed. It's funny, isn't it? When you asked, how about the way of Moses? They said, well, we're tripping. He's got 5 books. Now we found out that the 5 books didn't come from Moses. We know that. We know that he went into the Sinai. Everybody believes that he went into the Middle East and got his revelation from Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. He didn't. Sinai is in Africa. It's still in Kemet, right? He went to the Sinai and got the revelation to finalize, to bring the Hebrews out, right? And give them the laws. But they attributed documents that were written by their brothers, okay, their black brothers, their Khan brothers, who had these suppositories of knowledge. They took those documents and attributed to Moses alayhi salam. Moses had the Ten Commandments and he had other laws. No doubt, no doubt he was spoken to by Subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know this, we know. Because even in the hieroglyphics, the writings that they had is there. The King's List talks about Moses alayhi salam. It's there. And it talks about him leaving. It talks all about that. So we know it's true. So I hope that answered. Let me see here. Brother say yes. Interesting. Yes. I was just discussing the similar Garden of Eden is in Africa. Yes. That we know this debate because the Middle East was not opened up as we understand. Europe was not opened up. Asia was not opened up at all. And this is the fallacy that mankind began in the Middle East. It didn't. It began in Africa, in the Rift Valley. We know that. See, we know this to be the case. So now, brothers and sisters, I'm going to go a little bit more into this because I want everybody to understand this aspect on how we were defrauded, how we were misled, and how the Christian religion, as you understand it, is nothing more than an old traditional African religion. It's just that they had the names transposed. The evidence also shows that in addition to that, Christian Europe had wrestled the Bible and the faith created from the Bible out of the hands of the Jewish people, because now they knew that the Jews had lied to them, and introduced documents of the Bible and knew the historical, linguistic, and cultural sources and context of Christian doctrine, because the Jews were pushed to peripheral of the Christian communities of Europe. They were also refused to tell where the documents of the Bible originated. The European scholars were on to now the white Jews who were there. They were angry after the Middle Ages. Now they had to, now they're into the day of enlightenment now for them. They knew the Bible was a fraud, so to speak. They knew this. See, so what happened was they began to ask them, where did you get your documents to compile the Old Testament? They could not do it. They knew that the documents came out of Egypt. They were not compiled in Jerusalem or in Israel. They were compiled in Egypt, in Alexandria in particular. And on top of that, it says here that historical documents of the Jewish people confirm that the early documents of the Christian Bible were edited until about the 7th century, meaning now after Jesus passed on, by 7th century, they begin to change it again, the Bible. And these records also confirm the documents of the Christian Bible were not compiled, re-edited, translated in Israel or Judea, but in ancient Egypt. Because Ptolemy was in Egypt. He was now the king of Egypt. He enlisted the Jewish scholars to draw the Bible. They took the documents from this archives and some other archives, and then began to compile a Bible. They took the names that we understand. I gave you last week. Last week, I think it was. Yeah. And I gave you the names, the Khan names that were taken off the hieroglyphics of who these people were. And let me give you a story behind that too, brothers. It's not off topic. The brother, I told you I met him years ago. He's now passed on. Dr. Dakwa. He's from Ghana. He wrote also. He was friends with Greenberg. When he had access, he got access to the King's List, because now they found these archives. They found the King's List, which is 31 dynasties in the history. They found when, Manitou, this is his name, that's the Greek name for him. He's the one who wrote the Egyptian history. And I'll give you his name here in a bit. So what happened was, when this history was compiled, okay, it was compiled. These names and everything, again, were Akan. The Jewish scientists who uncovered these archives, began to translate. They said, they don't know these names. Who is Tutu and Koma? They didn't know any, but Darkwa, Professor Darkwa said, whoa, wait a minute. These are Khan names. The names that was written from Memphis It's not Memphis. It was translated into Greek Memphis. It's called Menphi. And it's a city in Ghana today called Menphi, meaning the same, translation as that of ancient Kemet. There's other such documents. The King's List, Tutu Ankoma, is the name that was translated, but the Europeans and Greenberg did not have the linguistic African languages behind them. So they asked for Darkwa. They gave Darkwa all these documents. He began to look at it. He said, whoa, these are Khan names. These are God names. These are Hausa names. These are Hausa documents. This is how this was exploded. Books then were generated and out. Greenberg wrote a book about the Bible myth. It's in there. You go look it up. You can buy these books today. You read it. It's very interesting. It destroys the myth of the Christian religion that you understand it today. And now we ain't just talking. We have proof of this. See, so we know that by the 7th century, these documents were compiled. Now, let's go back a little bit more on this. When the Europeans found out that they were doped, as I told you before, the documents of the so-called Christian scholars now decided that they were going to change the Bible again. They said that the Old Testament, and this is why you have the divide between the Jews and the Christians today. Have you noticed that? The Christians follow, quote unquote, the New Testament. They said the Old Testament is flawed. The Jews said the New Testament was the creation of the Europeans and is flawed and is not from God, from Subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have that divide, don't we? When the Christians realized that they were doped, they created the New Testament. Because you have to ask the question, brothers and sisters, when you look at the New Testament, how did these European names get there? They didn't speak these languages. The language of the prophets and the language of those areas were Afro-Asiatic. They were not French and Latin and Greek. How did they come up with all of these European names in the New Testament? How is it that Jesus said early in quote unquote in the New Testament, he said, I'm here to enforce the Torah, the Old Testament. But then in the New Testament, we find where it's been changed, where it says that you can eat pork and anything that you want. See, so we have those discrepancies. So, like was said here, the foundation of Christianity, therefore, began, from the premise that God that inspired Jewish prophets to write documents of the Old Testament. The question is, did God inspire Moses to write the ancient Egyptian religious documents and myths and folk tales that were found in the first 5 books of the Bible? This is a damning indictment. We know our prophet Moses was given a divine revelation, no doubt. But what happened was the Jewish scholars, and this is why Subhanahu wa ta'ala is hard on them in the Quran, because he knows us very well. He said, I ain't having this. We're going to bring forth another prophet. We're going to bring forth a religion that's going to stand to the time of the day of judgment. And I will not have this book be corrupted, because the Jews corrupted the book. We have a passage in there where Subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this. Subhanahu wa ta'ala was talking to black people, the ancient Egyptians, the Kemetics before. He gave them all the things on Tawheed. That's why they wrote those documents, Tawheed. They gave the names of the King's List, which we call Oti. Okay, that's the name they called that. In there was Moses, alayhi salam. Moses went to the mystery systems. He learned all of the religious laws and everything that we found its way in the Old Testament. The question is, did he write the 5 books? They don't believe that he did write the 5 books. He gave elementary laws, and he probably did have other documents, because the Samaritans had things that was not entered into the Bible. When the Samaritans brought forth these to the Jewish and European societies, I forgot like what they call them in way back, centuries, I forgot what they called them. They said it's heretical. And when they gave the order to kill them on sight, they did. And many of the documents we understand from the Samaritans have been destroyed. But we know because the Muslims kept record of one scribe before he died. And he had documents of John the Baptist and so forth and so on, as we know him in Yahya. That's how we know about the prophet is right, because the Samaritans had John the Baptist's writings, alayhi salam. And we know John the Baptist and Jesus came from the tribal group, the Essene. Who are the Essene people? The Essene people today are there in Ghana and parts of Cote d'Ivoire and parts of Togo and so forth, right? We know that. The Essene people, the Akan people, all of those tribes that you know that of the 12 that's supposed to have been lost, they weren't lost. All those names, if you look at their Akan names, we find them still today in Ghana. I gave you a thing about Netanyahu's name. There's two clans, okay? Neta and Yahu, okay? Now, they combined in a treaty, became Netanyahu, who's the prime minister of Israel today, who's killing our brothers in Gaza. How did the Jews have all of these same names? See, again, there's unequivocal proof, brothers and sisters, that we were the chosen people. It was not the Jews that you see today. They were not. The chosen people were the God people, the Akan people, the Hausa people, the Otik people. The Igbo people. There's the Mende people. There's many groups who had documents and kings there in Kemet. Subhanahu wa ta'ala talked to us first, especially the Akan people, and he gave us all of the mysteries, and it found its way in the Bible. This is why I said, brothers and sisters, there's many discrepancies in the Bible. Now, here's one. If you look at Genesis has a problem. We said that everything's supposed to be going into the Middle East. But why did Subhanahu wa ta'ala say in Genesis that he talks about the strange land, that you'll be strangers in the land? He did not say that Egypt was the land of strangers. He called Canaan and all these other areas the land of strangers, right? Okay, Genesis 17:8, Genesis 37.1, Genesis 28.4, Genesis 36.7. You can go back to review this. This goes indicates to show you that the original Jews were in Africa from the beginning. Because he said, when you leave to go on this Exodus, you'll be a stranger in these lands. So wait a minute. If we say that the Hebrews, Jews' homeland actually was in the Middle East, then why did Subhanahu wa ta'ala say in Genesis the exact opposite of that? He said, you'll be a stranger in these lands. And he says about Ibrahim, but before it was changed, it says that he went to the south. He's in Messer. He's in Kemet. He went to the south. He didn't go to the north. This is what I'm saying, brothers and sisters. It's going to hurt a lot of Christians because they're going to say, hey, man, look, I go to church. I know what my pastor says. Well, you ask your pastor about these documents. Ask him about the archives of the archives of here, the Arna archives. You ask your pastors about this thing, about the documents they found in there. How did it find its way 3,000 years later in the Bible? How did the hymns of Akhenaten, okay, do we know him in the Akan language, find its way, and you call it hymns in the Bible, as the same as the hymns of Akhenaten that was written in the archive, then our brothers' archive, in these caves, in these suppositories? How did it find its way in the Bible? How did the Song of Solomon become Song of Solomon when the tale of two brothers is the same? Brothers and sisters, this is what I'm talking about. You ask your learned people to explain that. How is it that they compile documents? They say, no, the documents were compiled in Jerusalem or in the Middle East. They weren't. It's proven that they were compiled in Egypt. What documents did they use to compile this Bible? I've asked that question you've seen on YouTube. I gave you, because I want you to do your research. I said, where are these documents at? We found them. They're in these archives, and they're Egyptian documents, not Jewish. This is what I'm talking about, brothers and sisters. See? This is why I'm saying a lot of people will be upset, but don't get upset. You do your research, and you have to ask the question, what do you believe? If you believe that that book, the Bible, is true, then you explain something to me. Why didn't you just go? Why didn't the Jews, scholars, compile and say, hey, look, I'm giving you what our ancient brothers had? They didn't do that. They proposed a lie by saying we were the chosen people. These are our documents. Subhanahu wa ta'ala chosen us, and so forth and so on, which was not true. The Akan people, the God people, the Igbo people, the Hausa people, the Mende, the Fulani, the Senike, all of these groups, all the way down the line, the Mende, Mandinka, all you are West Africans, you are the ancient Egyptians. It's you that Subhanahu wa ta'ala talked to first. It was you who he gave the mysteries and the riddles of the universe. It's you who had the first writing systems. It's you who wrote down Subhanahu wa ta'ala's words. Some say that he sent angels that we call aliens, okay, extraterrestrials from the sky, because in the hieroglyphics, it showed them coming to Kemet. They have them. They showed them perfectly in like makeshift ships, spacecraft. They showed them and showed the diagrams of them on hieroglyphics. Subhanahu wa ta'ala, did he send them to give the Kemites even more knowledge? I don't know. But we know that we, West Africans, Fulani, Hausa, all of you are ancient Egyptians. It's you who carry the DNA designations, not the Europeans. This is what I'm talking about. Now I've given you even additional proof. Now, let me talk some more about this. More documents here. The compilers and the translators of the Old Testament documents that became the foundation of Christian Bible claimed that the ancient Egyptian prophets wrote these documents. That was clever because it effectively made it impossible to verify the authors of these documents. Secondly, where did they get the documents to compile the New Testament? Brothers and sisters, you Christians, you have to ask your pastors these questions. Where did they get the documents to compile the new books in the New Testament? Now, Jewish modern scientists, Africans, are famous scholars, okay, in Africa, uncovered all of this. Okay, and this is why many of them went to go to destroy them. You asked, where are those documents? Where are those documents? How did the European names become the translator? I mean, the spokesperson for Isa, alayhi salam, who died centuries before. How did they and they quote him? How? When they weren't there? How was, and the Europeans weren't there either. They were there as conquerors, but they weren't there who were next to Isa alayhi salam, because he was among the Esseni people, and they were fundamentalists in Tawheed. So where are those documents? That's what I'm talking about. Now you see this. I'm giving you this. It says here, today Christians around the world still do not know where these documents came from. And they believe it, and they attribute the writers of the New Testament Gospels to fictitious names of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Brothers and sisters, these here, we have Jewish and Africans who've exposed this. I ask you today, my Muslim brothers who know Christians, don't get mad with them. And you gently ask your brothers or those in your family, when they profess that the Bible is the word, you ask them, where are these documents? And you ask them, what about this or in the archives? Why do we find documents that were there 3,500 years before find its way into the Bible? How did the hymns of Akhenaten find its way into the Bible? And you call it hymns, and it's almost exactly the same as the hymns of Akhenaten, which was almost 3,000 years before. There's a problem here, brothers and sisters. And I'm trying to help our brothers to discern. All of us, me too, we were doped as well. But I told you, many Africans, Black Africans, even Christians today are uncomfortable when they pick up the Bible because they feel something's not right. Even when I was a child, I had a hard time with it. And I never felt good about it. And I couldn't articulate it. See, when I got to college, things began to unravel more. I started to have more questions. And now we have Africans who have done the same thing. When they uncovered these archives who was buried, and they began to translate those documents. Dr. Darko was one who translated and came up and said, these are Akan names. And what blew him away was Menfi. Menfi was translated into Memphis. That struck him because he said, we have Menfi in Ghana today. When he found we have Africans of the Kan, Ga languages, we have people by the name Tutu and Koma. How is that? 3,500 years, 4,000 years beforehand, Tutankhamun, that's his name, in the archives as Tutu and Koma. Brothers and sisters, I'm saying to you again, Egypt is ours. Subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to you, Fulani. He spoke to you, Hausa. He spoke to you, Mende and Mendinka, and Sinike, Ewe, Igbo, Yoruba, Kapeli, all Songhai, Wolof, all of these ethnic groups. You are the ancient Egyptians. It was you who were there. It's you that Subhanahu wa ta'ala talked to. It's you who put the archives with all the information from Subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Europeans and the Jews stole it and said it was them who were chosen people, when in fact it was not them. It was you, brother. Your brother who's sitting next to you, who's Hausa, his ancestors were chosen ones by Subhanahu wa ta'ala to give all this mystery knowledge to. It wasn't the Frenchmen and the Greeks and all that. No, it was you, brother Hausa. It was you, brother Fulani. It was you, brother Mendinka. It was you, brother Sanike, brother Igbo, and Yoruba, and the Ewe people. It was all of you people, all of us. Subhanahu wa ta'ala talked to us. And they found these in these documents here, in these archives that were buried. And when they found that, they said, we got a problem with the Bible. The Bible stole, copied these documents and put it into the Bible and said that this is their sacred document. And it became the biggest fraud in history. I'm sorry, brothers and sisters, I have to say it like this. The Christians tried to say that the Quran and the Bible, that we borrowed from that. We didn't. Subhanahu wa ta'ala gave his message to our Prophet ﷺ. In there, you don't find nothing that's similar to the Bible. Nothing. In there, he told the Christians and Jews compromise, especially the Jews, his word, because Subhanahu wa ta'ala gave his word to the black people, because he says in the Quran, I formed you out of black mud. So those people he formed out of black mud, he gave them the mysteries of the universe and on earth. And he gave them the message of Tawheed. That's right, brothers. This is why, I'm telling you, this is hard hitting. This is hard hitting. Okay, well, let me find here. Okay, our brother said, just discussing. Okay, yes, okay. Canaan is the land of strangers. Interesting, yes. Why didn't Subhanahu wa ta'ala say Egypt was the land of strangers? This goes to show you that the original Jews were black and they were from Egypt. Because in the Old Testament, he says in Genesis, he talks about you will be going to a place and the land will be strange. Okay, land of strangers. He didn't say that it'd be Egypt. He said Canaan, and all these other places. Because I gave you, again, Genesis 17:8, Genesis 37:1, Genesis 28:4, Genesis 36:7. Land of strangers. Not Egypt, not Kemet, but others. That's interesting. That's why we have discrepancy. And again, brothers and sisters, why we have this big discrepancy. Remember what I told you before? Now, I'll get back to you guys. Just let me give you this again here. What did here? These are the three authorities on basically the Bible, and especially the Genesis chronological history. Now you understand why the Bible is so deadly. You have three different groups who differ, who argue, who say it's them who have the right message. You go look these up. I'm giving you food for thought and food for you to do your research. What you believe, brothers and sisters, when you put that white man there in your books and you put that white man on your wall, you are wrong. You are dead wrong. Jesus and Moses, all of them were not white. Solomon, David, none of them were white. They were all black. And we know now that the documents were not written as we understand them by Jewish people. They were written by the Akan, the Hausa, the Ga people. All these people had their hand in these documents. The King's List, which we call OTI in English. This King's List is what was used for the chronological of Genesis. It's almost similar, brothers and sisters. How can it be? That's what I'm asking. Okay, here, yeah, New Testament, good question. Yes, the New Testament, brothers and sisters, we have here where we have Jewish scientists and African scientists, scholars in their own right, talking about this thing, okay? Talking about how did they come up with where are these documents at today for the New Testament? And these fictitious names of Matthew, John, and so forth, Luke. How did the Europeans' language and their people get there next to the biblical people, especially to Jesus? He had already passed. So how did they get these documents and get his sayings? We have problems here. We got problems here, brothers and sisters, the New and Old Testament. And also to give you something else about this issue. What we believe, what we don't believe. The New Testament has a lot of things. It's probably true. They did take the documents from the archives. Okay, probably did. Others they manufactured, because when they manufactured Matthew, he was not Hebrew. How did these Europeans from England get over there when they weren't even created yet? This is what I'm talking about, brothers and sisters. There was no Englishman at that time that we understood. They were the ones who were in caves, because they were even talked about. The Vikings described them as barbaric, painted blue, eating raw meat. It's the Vikings who wrote about them. Their own white brothers, when they came to England, they found them in savage conditions, filthy. Some never took baths. They wrote about them. How did these people end up into the Jazira Arab, okay, and compile these documents? How? And no one can find those documents today. Yet and still, some of the documents in the New Testament mirror some that's in that archive. Brothers, it's a shame. The reason why they moved away from Akhenaten and to David and Solomon is because they want to make the books of knowledge more European. Yes, that's why they changed everything. They wrestled away the the Tawheed. And our brothers also made errors because in history, they went away from the Tawheed. They had the right message and they began to deviate, start worshiping animals. He created gods from all kind of water, animals, all kind of other stuff, and they got spanked. This is why they got invaded and conquered. When Akhenaten came in, Akhenaten, as his name in the Khan language, that's written in the hieroglyphics, when he came, he brought back Tawheed. And the next time when I talk here, I'll get into this Exodus and I'll explain more to you about this because I want to go bits and because I'm giving you a lot of stuff for you to digest because I want you to do your research. I don't want you to get mad at me. I want you to actually do the research behind this. Ben Nefer, now, okay, Ben Nefer is, no, let me write it here. What when they translated the document, excuse me, they translate the documents. Menfi, yeah, Menfi. Okay, now, and here when they wrote the documents, they found the city. They talked about Memphis. Because they did not say Menfe. Now, Menfe, you find, of course, they put the word together now, Menfe. It's the same meaning. If you look at the translation of in the Metadata, okay, the language of the hieroglyphics, they have the city called Menfe, or it's there. It's there. Now, maybe they have another name that you're talking about, my dear brother. I'm not sure of that. I didn't hear of that name. I know the name that the Professor Dakwa was talking about, that when he translated the documents, he found, because now when Greenberg and them asked for him as a linguist expert, he said, look, we've translated these documents now. We got these documents, but we don't know these names. What language? We don't have the African linguistic prowess and understanding. They knew Professor Dakwa did. And then he said, whoa. The first thing he said when I talked to him in 2000, in year 2000, I talked to him. And he explained to me, then he knew he was on to something. He knew. And then he also, when he began to see Netanyahu, and all these other names, he found Jesus and John the Baptist. He found their tribe as what was written as who? The Asene people. The Asene people are still in their group today. Their tribal group is still in Ghana and parts of Cote d'Ivoire and parts of Togo today. See, so this is what we know, and the reason why, yes, and see, I want you to get into, I want you to research that a little bit more, my dear brother, and get back to me on this about this the other name. Because the name that Dakwa translated was Menfe, that he translated out of the documents. See, so this is, again, so we'll see this. DNA says blacks are Moroccan, Egyptian, and now we are nomads outside the continent. What is the solution to this type of staleness? Well, brothers and sisters, I've given you something. If you've been following me in my talks, you see, I've been leading you to a history that's been whitewashed. I've been giving you a lot of history to show you your importance on the world stage. And I've uncovered all this BS, like what has happened now about what happened in Kemp and how our religion we created was hijacked and called Christianity, when in fact it was something other than that. So the solution is by studying. Why did the Tubab and their power structures want the knowledge taken from us? They did not want us to uncover that because we had it from the beginning. Today in Africa, still what the illiteracy is what? 40, 50, 60%? Some countries, 70% of the people are illiterate, unlettered. Even here in Morocco, we have unlettered. I think 40% of the people unlettered. When in ancient times, they weren't that way. We all had a writing system. But when the Europeans came, they disrupted that, and we still have this illiteracy going on today. It's the reason why they don't want you to have the knowledge. See. Okay. All right. Now let's. Here. Are you okay? I'm a little long today as usual, but I have to talk about this, my dear brothers and sisters, because this is something. Again, I'm going to go back to this again. What they uncovered. The Christians around the world still do not know where the documents came from. We talked about this. They do not know. See, they don't know. They don't know where these documents came from. They don't know. They don't care. All they know is sacred. That's all they know. Then, and they still believe it. And they attribute writers of the New Testament Gospels to fictitious Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. However, nobody knows who these authors were. And most Christians know that these were not their real names. But it doesn't matter to them. This is because these documents have been woven into the faith of Christianity as holy and God-inspired documents. When they uncovered all of these documents, brothers and sisters, in our archives here in Africa, in Kent, it blew these scientists away. Some, it was so profound, like Greenberg. There's others. I'll give you others who wanted to get into the act. And they removed it out of here too. I see they removed. Let me see. They removed. Okay, let me get this here. Okay. This again. Okay, I'm giving you that. I'm over here trying also to find the professor. His name was Parfit, who uncovered the real Jewish gene. This is all of these things, brothers and sisters, that they uncovered. It's mind-boggling. Also, they found documents talking about things too that they found in the East. Somebody talked about this before earlier. The Chinese and Japanese have acquired African tribal names and physical features. Yes. Our brother who talked about this earlier, remember he talked about that. He said it's true. When I begin to try to learn the Japanese language, I start to and when I see and hear, all of a sudden I hear a name from West African brother say his name. I quickly, because I said, man, I heard like Japanese had a name similar to this. Now we understand why. Because the Japanese scientists came to Africa trying to find out why their language is the way it is. And then they uncovered it's African. And they talked about that. See? So now we know. And I told you about the Indian Ocean. There, Sentinel Island. There's I forgot. There's many of these islands that's sitting in the ocean where the subcontinent right there. I told you I came across these black folk there in southern Thailand. They were from the Andaman Islands. See, so we know we made it there. We know that. So all of this, brothers and sisters, is a hard-hitting indictment and stuff like that. And let me get into something here. Okay. Now the scientists got even more into this. They're talking about here, they said, start around 5th century BC, which was the coming of the early Greek scholars to ancient Egypt. In the 5th century, Herodias, remember we talked about Herodias, is him who talked about the ancient Kemites, the Egyptians, all the way up north, going into Iran at that time, okay, as black. Remember I told you when they start going further north outside the continent, they were blacker, but start to get a little lighter and their hair was more curlier. Remember I told you what Herodias said. Here they're talking about Herodias. Was one of the first Greeks to travel and record history of ancient Egypt for the people in Greece. His work, has become a credible source about ancient Egyptian history for the Europeans for 2,000 years. Now, he says this. And again, we go back into how the Greeks began to get the documents, and they began now, after they were doped, they begin to change the names, and they begin to change the names that they found on the our documents and begin to change them into their names. And then this is why the Greek history and culture is tied into ancient Egypt. It's a lie, because they got into the act of lying. Subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran talks about that. And this is why he said, I'm not going to let these people anymore, you Jews and you Christians, to come into Islam, come against us and change our books and change my word, because they changed the word that he gave to our ancestors in Kemetic to make it their own. And we know that because anybody with common sense, we're talking biblical times. We talk about way back 5th century or so. How did the Europeans from England, Ireland, Welsh get there and get documents? Okay, talk to Jesus, and so forth. So how? And they put their names in the Bible. They took that. That's what I'm trying to say, brother, sister. They stole this legacy. See, and there's some things in the Bible too that's very puzzling. If Jesus is who is supposed to be among them, why did he call the Jewish scholars and learned men? He said, I know of you. You are of your father. He was a liar and a murderer from the beginning. This is what is said that Jesus ﷺ told these Jews, and that, at that time, he said, you are of your father. He says, you are a liar, and your father was a liar and a murderer from the beginning. And there's many translations of this, meaning that Isa, because we know the prophet, we know the Subhanahu wa ta'ala said that the Jews of the modern Jews of time killed their prophets and changed the books. They created the Talmud, new books. They begin to change others. See, so we have all this information, brothers and sisters, and I'm hoping that today I'll give you something to do more research and so forth and so on, because this is what and I'll give you one more thing here, and I'll close here. The ancient Greeks who were now in charge of Kemetic, of ancient Egypt, had one scribe. We know him in the history. I studied about him. They called him this name here okay. You know him as the Greek historian. As the Egyptian historian who helped the Greeks to understand our history. It's him who got these from the suppositories and began to write the histories and so forth. But when you look at his name in the hieroglyphics, this is the Khan name that they know him to be. Omane Anto. This is the name they found in the hieroglyphics. The Greeks called him Manitou, but this is the name that was actually written in the documents. It's him who wrote the ancient history. It's him who described the dynasties as 31 dynasties he described. See, he described 31 dynasties, and it's him. This is his name, and it's him talking about the ancient Kemetic history. It says here that the Greeks also transposed the indigenous and very important Akan name of ancient the gods, because when they're mushrikeen, they took these gods name the names of their gods, and they began to change that. They talk about the king's list. The Greeks now want to wrestle away the history from the black Africans, so they begin to change the names into European names. Okay, this is why we have the problems with Akhenaten and Tutankhamun and so forth and so on, because they changed the names. This is again something that's very bad. When you think about this, very bad. What has happened? It's a fraud what they had done, and now they've been called on it. And so I give you this proof today, and I'm hoping you run with it and that you do your research. And again, brothers and sisters, we have to look at this for what it is. And I gave you the evidence today. I gave you the Genesis, to talk about the Genesis and why we have the discrepancy. The Jews, when you think about today, the Jews said no. The Hebrews and Jews, they say originated out of the Middle East. We know that's not the case, because even when they compiled the documents, Subhanahu wa Ta'ala said, okay, when he talked to us, he talked about when there will be an exodus. Okay, he talked about when these people leave. And again, in Genesis 17.8, 37.1, 28.4, 36.7, I give you all that reference. He said the land of strangers. We have a problem. If the Jews and Hebrews were from the Middle East, as he was trying, if they have alerted to, why did Subhanahu wa Ta'ala say this is the land of strangers? Subhanahu wa Ta'ala talks about their movement in Egypt, in Kemetic. He did not call that the land of strangers. But when they begin to leave that, he said this is the land of strangers. That's telling. That's telling, brothers and sisters, very telling. And so we have this information, brothers and sisters, today that I gave you. And I have a lot more, but I'm going to cover some other stuff the next time around, inshallah. I'll talk about this famous Exodus, why it happened. And it's not going to be what you think from what you saw in the movie or what you see the white scholars write and your pastor and all them talk about. I urge all of you Christian brothers and all the Muslim brothers who know Christians, and you're good friends with people in your family or their bishops or any of these. Now you armed with information and you ask your brothers kindly, what do you believe? And you start giving them this information and ask them to, so what's up with that? When you ask your pastor, you just read the hymns. Why is it the hymns of Akhenaten was written 3,000, between 2,000 and 3,000 years before? How did it end up in the Bible? And you call it hymns. Why you didn't call it hymns of Akhenaten? Why you just call it hymns? Why you call it that? It's the same as that. You look at the Song of Solomon. I mean, it goes on and on. You have a discrepancy in the 5 books of Moses alayhi salatu wasalam. He didn't write that, because how could he die? It's written in Genesis, and then turn back around, he's dead, and go back and write the additional last book, which is the 5th book. How? Moses alayhi salatu wasalam says in Genesis that he's talking about where he was buried. So how could he be dead and gone and then come back to write another book of his last book? This is what I'm talking about. We have a problem, brothers and sisters. We got a problem. And then, to add to the matter, you ask your pastors which of the group here that they follow on the versions of the Bible. Which one? And what was the name of the Bible before it became the Bible? They don't even know that. But we know that the Bible original name was what? Here. Again. We know this here, or translation means 70. Okay. We know that the original Bible was called this word. and it was changed. See, we know that because we have documentation showing that the computation that was by the Jewish scholars that was given to the Greeks, this is the name that it was given. See, interesting. Interesting. So now you have this information here, and they took our documents from the archives of the excuse me here. They took the archives from the Arna. There's a con name for that. I don't know it. They took it from these archives and they changed things around, and they added many of the documents, like the hymns, Song of Solomon, that was written in Egyptian documents they found in these archives, which was written approximately 2,000, some written 2,500, others was written 3,000 years before. And the Bible, we know, was not called the Bible. It was called the Septuagint, which means 70. This is what it was. It says here by history also, we know it took 100 years for the Jewish scientists to compile the Bible as we understand it. It took them 100 years. I don't know if you knew that, but we have documentation to show it took them 100 years because they had to translate the Egyptian documents to put it into the Bible. And it was not easy. And there was wars, famine, there's things happen. People die. Of course, you know that. So others took over to do this. And they finally compiled this thing in 581 BC, before Jesus was born, alayhi salam. And it was not known as the Bible at that time. See, we know the Torah was hijacked. That's why Subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about that in his book. These documents were destroyed. The way of Moses, the way of Jesus, alayhi salam, the way of Solomon, all of them, all these books were destroyed because they were ancient Egyptian documents and they were destroyed. We cannot find those documents today. If the Jews or you see the people, you see them today talking, you hear them, many of them say this. I see it the other day, they're talking in Hebrew, which I kind of have working knowledge of Hebrew. He was talking about how they were the chosen people, how they were given this commission. That's not true, brothers and sisters. It's not true. We know it's a lie. And I showed you the map here. Excuse me. Yeah. I showed you the map here, and I gave you the definitions of this, of the map, I gave you the black, the red, blue, purple, green, what does it mean, and so forth and so on. And it shows the migration pattern and whatnot. These people were black, brothers and sisters. And even the Jews, the blacks who went into Egypt, the Akan people, all of the house, all of them went into Egypt, into Europe. And then they began to return back. They were no longer Akan. They were now more or less, they were more Greek than anything else. They were black people, but they were Greek. And they began to pull a fast one on the Greeks, and they compiled documents, which it took them 100 years. And this is the problem that we have today, brothers and sisters, that nobody of the scientists can explain. And that's why I asked you, my brothers and sisters who are Christians today, you asked your esteemed pastors and bishops the questions that I laid out today. I gave you some documentation on archives. You asked your dear bishop, when he recites the hymns in the Bible, how is it that the hymns are identical to the hymns of Akhenaten, which was written approximately between 2,000 to 3,000 years before? How did it end up in the Bible? You asked your bishops and your learned Christian people about that. You asked them about that archives, the Arna archives that were discovered. And they found all these documents that made its way into the Bible. So the Bible that you will understand to today, it's sacred coming from us. But they got it and he butchered it. Subhanahu wa ta'ala chided them in the Quran for it. Because he gave this message to black people that were in ancient Egypt first. There was a prophet there. We don't know who he was. But he gave him this information and gave us all this information on Tawheed, on monotheism. He gave us the riddles, and then we deviated, our people deviated from that, and he allowed the disbelievers to come in to conquer us. The Greeks and the Romans and others began to come over because we left God's word, subhanahu wa ta'ala's word, and became mushrikeen, meaning we start worshiping 1,000 gods. We start worshiping river, water, animals, you name it. We start doing things that was not right. Subhanahu wa ta'ala punished us for it. See, so my brothers and sisters, I gave you this information today, and you have to again ask those questions today. And I'm hoping you go back over some of the excerpts of this, and then you do your research of this. And those who want to get back to me, you can. But now you have food for thought. You Muslims, you in particular, now you understand why your book is the last remaining book. You understand now why Subhanahu wa ta'ala said he was not allow his book to be corrupted because the others became corrupted. Now you understand. You Muslims understand that your book is the final chapter to this mystery system. And in this book, he warns you about the trickery of the Jews and the Christians. He said they are among each other. They were protectors of one another. Now you understand why he said that. People say that today, meaning that we can kill them. No, he's warning us because of what I gave you the information today. They took his word, compiled it in a book they called the Bible, and they changed things around and said that they were the ones spoken to when he Subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't speak to them. When they knew now that their lie was uncovered, they began to kill and enslave and go after us and say we were inferior people, that we were cursed, that we were monkeys, eating bananas out of trees, and so from so on. See, Subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us information in there and says, these people here, he says, if you go among them, you are among them, if you go among them. He had a reason for that. It's not because he hates them. He does, Subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us a warning. Now you understand why Subhanahu wa ta'ala is one of the reasons why he gave you, because they corrupted his books that he gave to our ancestors. Akhenaten, everybody knows him to be under Tawheed, under oneness, monotheism. He reintroduced this. This is in the 18th dynasty. You look it up. He wrote this beautiful hymns in tribute to Subhanahu wa ta'ala. Beautiful. They got those hymns and put it in the Bible, but they changed some of the wording here and there and some of the names. See, now you have this information, brothers and sisters. And I'm hoping today that you get this information, that you run with it, and you look at it, and you know that you are descendant, our brothers here on this continent, mainly those who sitting in West Africa, those who sitting in the United States and also Canada and Europe, who are descendant from West Africans, who moved or who were when slaves. The Amazigh people, who were black people in those days, they called them the Mozart people. All of them were the chosen ones. We had Tawheed, monotheism, before anyone else had it. And they took our documents, changed it, and compiled it in a book they call the Septuagint, or the 70, as it was called first, and then it was changed again to call the Bible. So I gave you that, brothers and sisters. I'm hoping you do your research. Those who like this type of talk, please subscribe to my station. I give it to you as best way I know. I give it to you and I give you the evidence and so forth and so on. If you like these talks, please subscribe, pass the tape. I urge you, those who come in the future, please review this talk. Please review it. Go back to it, get excerpts out of it, do research, go to Christians and ask them about some of the things I just said. Ask them about the archives that were found. Ask them about the hymns of Akaton. I can even put some of this down so you can look at it, so you'll have it. The hymns of Akaton. This is the name. This is the Akan name that was actually written, that they found in the documents. And you ask, how did these hymns from Akaton, who was famous for he brought back the Tawhid in the 18th dynasty, he brought it back. How did it end up in the Bible? And they call it the hymns. Why they didn't call it the hymns of Akaton? Why they try to hide the black ancient Kemetic heritage? Why? They call it the hymns, but it was actually, he wrote that. They found all these documents now, brothers and sisters. So with that, I'll leave all that to you and all the information. And I'll leave you with that. Assalamu alaikum. Rahmatullahi wabarakatuh.